Welcome to another edition of the 49 Niners Radio, 49ers Live on Niners Radio. Brian Professor B. Davis here in San Francisco. Our segment is presented by for the 49ers. Check out the website 49ers.com as it is presented by United Airlines. United Airlines, the official airline partner of your San Francisco 49ers. Here on Niners Live right now. We as we get ready for the NFC Divisional Playoffs this Sunday over at Levi Stadium in Santa Clara. The Niners and the Dallas Cowboys are rivalry renewed at Levi Stadium in Santa Clara. We're going to be on for just about a half hour. Have a very quick abbreviated show. Spending some time trying to get people to come on the podcast later this week. Try to preview the Niners and Cowboys for the NFC Divisional Playoff. The winner of this game, the survivor of this game, will punch their ticket to the NFC Championship game, which also Saturday's game. And then for the other half of the divisional playoff, the Philadelphia Eagles, who are coming off their bye week with the best record in football, they have the number one seed. The they will take on the New York Giants in the NFC Divisional Playoff, and that's going to be the late game on Fox. And that game has significance because if the Philadelphia Eagles win, they will host the NFC Championship, and they'll face the winner of the 49ers Dallas Cowboy game. We'll play that game in Philadelphia on Sunday, January 29th. And then also on that date, however, if the New York Giants were to upset the Eagles, that means the winner of the Niners Cowboy game, hopefully the Niners come out with a W, would host that NFC Championship game on December 29th at Levi Stadium in Santa Clara as well. And that's going to be a lot of significance going forward. So let's just give you some of the news on the 49ers and just the Niners and the Cowboys. The game will be at 3:30 p.m. Pacific. The game will be on Fox, and it will be Kevin Burkhardt and Greg Olson calling the play-by-play. We'll be doing the play-by-play in color, respectfully. And then the sideline reporters will be Aaron Andrews and Tom Rinaldi. They also will be on Fox Espanol, Fox Sports Mexico, and you can watch the game NFL Plus, all the postseason games through your phone or tablet, game replays and more. And if you want the game international, watch every game on demand, plus Red Zone and NFL Network. So, and then the game locally for Niners fans in the Bay Area on the U.S. Bank 49ers Radio Network, their flagship KMBR 680, 104.5 FM, play-by-play with Greg Papa and Tim Ryan. And a full game day coverage includes comprehensive live game 3-hour pregame show each week with post-game coverage after every broadcast. And then the Niners will be on Spanish radio with Jesus Sitari. Carlos Jutis will be exclusively on 49ers.com slash 49ers.com slash ESP dot to view all the Spanish content. And then you could also follow the 49ers on 49ers live blog for in-game updates, highlights, and stats during the divisional playoff matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. Be part of the action chatting live to share your live reactions, interact with fans across the world, and get your questions and game answered by 49ers digital media, Brianna McDonald. So the 49ers will be taking up, this will be the ninth time that these two long rivals will hook up in the NFC postseason. Dallas owns the all-time record 5-3 versus San Francisco. That's the all-time record. However, the Niners have beaten them the last two previous meetings, and that's going back to and of course the Niners and Cowboys go back the first time. This is going to be the ninth time the nighttime they were hooked up in postseason since 1970. Of course, they hooked up in the 1970 NFC Championship game at Old Keysar Stadium, the final game ever to be played at the historic Keysar Stadium, which is out there in the Haight-Ashbury district, right on the border of Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. The 49ers end up falling to the Dallas Cowboys 17-10 as the Cowboys would advance to Super Bowl V, which they would lose to the Baltimore Colts. Then again, they hooked up in the 1971 NFC Championship at Dallas's Texas Stadium. This time, by the way, the 49ers, both teams had new stadium, moved first year in their new homes. The Niners end up moving to the southeast part of town to Candlestick Park, and the Cowboys moved into their new Palace, Texas Stadium in Irving. It was the Cowboys beating the Niners 14-3 in that game in the NFC Championship game. In the NFC Championship game at Texas Stadium. So I just trying to find out the stats from that postseason from 1970 in the NFC Divisional Playoff. That was I'll give you the highlights or give you some of the stats from that game. It was a kickoff time at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. The game time temperature was at 48 degrees, and it was on this date back on excuse me, that was on Sunday, January 3rd, 1971. 59,364. The game was on CBS, and calling the game for CBS was both the late Ray Scott and the legendary broadcaster analyst Pat Summerall. And looking at some of the numbers of that NFC Championship game in that first matchup between the Niners and the Cowboys at Keysar Stadium is in this game, looking at some of the numbers, Craig Morton was 7 of 22 for 101 yards. He threw a touchdown. And then Dwayne Thomas in that game. I forgot to get my calculator. Hold on one second. So Dwayne Thomas, the running back, had 27 carries for 143 yards on 27 yards. And he averaged 5.2 yards on the ground. Walt Garrison had 71 yards on 17 carries. He averaged 4.1 yards per carry for the Cowboys, and they were the two. John Brody was 19 out of 40. 19 out of 40, and it was 40, threw for 262 yards. He threw a touchdown and 2 interceptions. And then Gene Washington, he had catches for 88 yards. So Gene Washington averaged 14.6 yards in receiving. And then he was the leading receiver for San Francisco. So that was that's how it went in, and then like I said, the Dallas Cowboys would advance to the NFC Championship or win the NFC Championship, and they would go on to lose to the Baltimore Colts in Super Bowl V. So then we'll go to 1971. This was now both the 49ers and by the way, that was the last game that ever was played at Kezar Stadium for the 49ers as they would move to the southeast sector of San Francisco, and they would end up playing the NFC Divisional Playoff, or the NFC Championship game. That was on, and that was on Sunday, January 2nd, 1972. The first Sunday of the new year, the first, in fact, on New Year's weekend, Sunday, January 2nd, 1972. This time the game was played at Texas Stadium in Irving, Texas, and it was a 1:30 Eastern, 12:30 Central. That's a 10:30 Pacific on the West Coast, and and that game was on CBS. Calling the game was two legendary broadcasters, both the late Jack Buck, the father of Joe Buck for ESPN, ABC, and Pat Summerall for CBS, calling this game. The Cowboys beat the 49ers 14-3 in the storylines. It was the rematch of the NFC Championship game. The previous year was at San Francisco. This time they rotated the hosting site rights. They did not have home field advantage at that time. And I'm just trying to look where the Niners finished that year in 1971. I just looking at the numbers there, it was at the time there was a rotation. There was no home. The home field advantage seating did not begin and play until 1975. The NFC, so the NFL hosted the rights between the champions under the format. So the NFC East winner had the rights to host the NFC Championship game. It was the fourth title game played at by the Cowboys, and the 49ers second under the NFL team preceding game. Dallas won the NFC East with an 11-3 record. They defeated the NFC Central Division champion Minnesota Vikings at Metropolitan Stadium in the divisional round to advance to the NFC Championship game. San Francisco won the NFC West with a 9-5 record and defeated the NFC East runner-up Washington Redskins 24-20 at Candlestick Park, which was the first ever playoff game at Candlestick in the divisional playoff to reach the NFC title game. This was also the Cowboys' first season in the brand of new Texas Stadium, the suburb of Irving. Since the Cowboys were on the road in the divisional round, the title game in San Francisco was the first playoff game at Texas Stadium. As the case, 1970, these teams did not play each other in the 1971 regular season. Their recent meeting was the NFC Championship from the previous year. So, for the first play of scrimmage, the Cowboys defense dominated the Niners, allowing only 61 yards rushing, 9 first downs, forcing 3 turnovers, all were interceptions. That was in the first playoff game. In the second quarter, Dallas defensive end George Andre intercepted a screen pass from John Brody, returned it 7 yards to the 49er 2. Calvin Hill, who was the father, of course, NBA star Grant Hill, 1 yard touchdown run. This will be the only score of the game until 6 minutes and 52 seconds remaining in the third quarter. Brody's 24-yard completion to tight end Ted Kwolek set up a Bruce Gossett's 28-yard field goal that made it 7-3 in favor of Dallas. Following a missed 47-yard field goal by Gossett, San Francisco's next drive, Dallas quarterback Roger Staubach finished the quarter with a 17-yard touchdown completion to halfback Dan Reeves. Then started a fourth quarter with a 23-yard Billy throw the Thomas. Eventually, the 14-play 80-yard drive on the 2-yard line, 2-yard touchdown run, making the score 14-3. With 9 minutes left in regulation, Dallas defense took the rest over the rest of the game, forcing turnovers. The Niners' last three drives. First, linebacker Chuck Howley broke up a fourth down pass. Then on San Francisco's next possession, Brody was intercepted by linebacker Leroy Jordan after Mike Clark's 24-yard field goal attempt was blocked by 49ers linebacker Frank Nunley. Safety Hall of Famer Cliff Harris picked off a pass from Brody and able to for the Cowboys to run out the clock. After the game, Dallas received a visit locker room from U.S. President former U.S. President Lyndon Johnson, who told Staubach, "You're the best. You should be. They should rename this place Staubach Stadium." This was the second postseason meeting between the Niners and Cowboys, with Dallas winning the previous meeting. The NFC champion Cowboys would get back to the Super Bowl, defeating the Miami Dolphins, champions of the AFC, with a convincing 24-3 win in Super Bowl VI to win their first Super Bowl, the first of two Super Bowls in the 70s. And this was the second. They ended up making the Super Bowl 71, 70, 71, 75, 77, 78. The first of five Super Bowl, second of would be five Super Bowl appearances for the Dallas Cowboys in the 1970s. The Cowboys would make it back to, of course, so let's just take some statistics from this game. We'll take some stats from this game. From that, so I'm just taking a look of the NFC Championship and just trying to find out the stats. Obviously, they don't have a link to that. Here we go. Here I got here's the box score. Yeah. So here are the totals of the game for the NFC Championship game. These two teams hooked up. Dallas had 244 total net yards to San Francisco 239. That was not bad. The Cowboys won that battle, was a plus 5 net yard differential to San Francisco. John Brody was 14 of 30 for 184 yards, a touchdown through 3 costly interceptions. The Cowboys was plus 3 in that turnover ratio, and the Niners were penalized once for 12 yards. Dallas twice for 30 yards. So it was a defensive game. Roger Staubach was 9 of 18. He only threw for 103 yards, and it was the ground attack was led by Walt Garrison, 52, 50, 52 yards on 14 carries, averaged 3.7 yards per pop on the ground. Then Walt Garrison was 44 yards rushing on 15 carries. He averaged 2.9 yards per on the ground. Staubach had 55 yards rushing on 8 carries, averaging 6.8 yards on the ground. For the 49ers, Vic Washington only 58 yards on 10 carries, which that is not bad, averaging 5.8 yards per carry. So that's how it went in Big D, as the Niners were denied advancing to the Super Bowl for the second. Now we're going to go to the 1972 NFC Divisional Playoffs, and this was now go to 72. This was more recently 50 years ago. We will take you to December 23rd, 1972, which, by the way, that was the Niners with a dark day for Bay Area sports fans, which earlier that day, the Raiders were victimized, losing a heartbreaker to the upstart Pittsburgh Steelers in the AFC Divisional Playoff, 13-7 on the immaculate reception by the late Franco Harris. The game in that early game, but then the 49ers, who the 49ers, both backup quarterback Roger Staubach replaced Craig Morton, as the Cowboys scored 17 unanswered points in the fourth quarter to overcome a 28-13 deficit. They end up and the San Francisco led. They were led and 5 turnovers. This was the third consecutive year Dallas eliminated San Francisco from Super Bowl contention. The Niners jumped out to an early 7-0 lead when Vic Washington returned an opening kickoff for 97 yards for a touchdown. Dallas cut that lead to 7-3. Then Tony Frisch, 37-yard field goal in the second quarter. 49ers receiver Gene Washington had a 52-yard reception to move deep into Dallas territory, only for the Cowboys quarterback Charlie Waters in the drive with an interception at the 1-yard line. But shortly thereafter the turnover, Dallas quarterback Craig Morton lost fumble, being hit by Wyndon Hall and Tommy Hart, which linebacker Ed Beer recovered at the Cowboys' 15-yard line. This led to Larry Schreibner's 1-yard touchdown run as the Niners increased their lead to 14-3. Later in the quarter, Morton was intercepted by linebacker Skip Vanderbunt at the Cowboys' 32-yard line, setting up Scribner's second rushing touchdown that increased San Francisco's lead to 21-3. But Morton rallied them back with 10 unanswered points and Frisch 45-yard field goal, and then the Hall of Famer great Lance Allworth, a.k.a. Bambi, a 28-yard touchdown that cut the deficit to 28-3. In the second half, the 49ers blew a chance to increase their lead when Bruce Gossett's 40-yard field goal attempt then got the ball back on Vanderbunt's second interception. Dallas managed to force the punt, which Jim McCann set out of bounds at the 5-yard line. A few plays later, Charlie Kruger stripped the ball from running back Calvin Hill at the 1-yard line. The Niners recovered, leading to Scribner's 1-yard touchdown lead score, giving the Niners a commanding 28-13 lead. Shortly after the end of the third quarter, Tom Landry replaced Morton with Roger Staubach, but it didn't seem to help. On the first drive, Staubach lost a fumble by being tackled by Bob Hoskins. San Francisco was in prime position to put the game away with another score, but they couldn't get the ball into the end zone. And then what made matters worse, Gossett's missed 32-yard field goal attempt, causing a huge reversal of the momentum. Now, with the ball, Hill ripped off a 48-yard gain on a draw play, set up a Tony Frisch 27-yard field goal, trimming the lead to 28-16 late in the quarter. A poor punt by McCann gave the Dallas Cowboys great field position at the 49ers' 45-yard line. Staubach led the team to the end zone, completing 2 passes to fullback Walt Garrison for 16 yards and 2 more to Billy Parks at the 20-yard line completion to cut the score at 28-23 with 2 minutes left. So the Niners were up 28-16, and they were only 2 minutes away from advancing to the NFC Championship for the third straight year. Now, because of the old rules by the rotation, if the Niners could hold on and recover this onside kick, if they could recover the onside kick, you know, if they could recover this onside kick, the Niners would be in prime position to all but intents and purposes run out the clock and advance to the NFC Championship. Now, because of the old rules of the NFL, the team from the East, because of the rotation, if the Niners hold on, they would host the NFC Championship at Candlestick Park the following Sunday. But it didn't turn out to be. With time running out, Dallas attempted an onside kick. All the Niners have to do, if they recover a clean onside kick, the game would have pretty much been over. But Preston Riley briefly handled the ball but couldn't hang on to it. It was recovered by Mel Renfro on the first play. After the recovery, Staubach gained 21 yards on the quarterback scramble. Then he connected on a 19-yard gain to Parks, who ran out of bounds at the San Francisco 10-yard line. On the next play, Staubach threw a 10-yard touchdown pass to Ron Sellers, giving Dallas a 30 to 28 lead with just under a minute left to play, 52 seconds to be exact. However, the 49ers were not quite out of the game. They still had a chance to salvage the game with a game-winning field goal. Brody completed 3 consecutive passes, but a 23-yard completion by Riley that would have put the Niners in the field goal range was wiped out due to a holding penalty. Then after that, Brody was intercepted on Waters' next play, which ended all the hopes. This game would mark the end of a 4-year battle of the starting quarterback position between Craig Morton and Staubach, who had an outstanding performance, 12 of 20 for 172 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 23 rushing yards in 1 quarter. Staubach became the permanent starter and would not relinquish it till the end of his career after the 1979 season. While Morton was traded to the New York Giants in 1974 and later became a starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos, Morton and Staubach would later meet again in Super Bowl 12. And this was a blow for the 49ers because that game sent both teams into opposite ends of the spectrum. I want to get the stats of this game, or Cowboys overcoming an 18-point deficit marked the second largest comeback in NFL postseason history at that time. Dallas outgained San Francisco. They had 402 total yards of offense to the Niners 255 and 22 first downs to the Niners 13. They also lost 5 turnovers and quarterback. They were -5 in the turnover ratio. Their quarterback was sacked 5 times. Brody was not sacked at all. He finished the game with a postseason career high 125 yards rushing and 1 reception for 6 yards. Parks caught 7 balls. He caught 7 balls for 136 yards as he averaged 19.4 yards per catch. Vic Washington had 200 all-purpose yards, 3 kickoff returns for 136 yards, and 56 yards rushing, 1 reception for 8. Cedric Hartman, the late Cedric Hartman, had 13 and a half sacks. This was the 3rd overall postseason meeting, such a thing in many years. The Cowboys and 49ers both had meetings in the NFC Championship game, both won by Dallas. That game was significant in a way that sent 2 teams in opposite ends of the spectrum. The game would mark not only for the 49ers, the Cowboys would continue to dominate as the NFC superiority throughout the rest of the decade, as they would have their battles with both the Minnesota Vikings and the Los Angeles Rams for the NFC superiority throughout the remainder of the decade, while the 49ers sank into uncharted territories because the Niners would go into a tailspin and they would not return to postseason play until 1981. And we know John Brody would play his final season in the NFL until 1973, where he retired. And in fact, the Niners went into a tailspin throughout the rest of the decade, and then by the mid late 70s, the team went through a transitional period where in 1977, where the Morabito family would sell the team, the sisters or the widows of or the Morabito family sold the club to Eddie DeBarlo, a, a real estate developer for the DeBarlo Corporation in 1977. He would get control of the franchise. By that time, the Niners went through coaching changes, and by the late 70s, they hit rock bottom both in 1978 and 79 with back-to-back 2-14 seasons. However, the Niners would bring in Bill Walsh in 1979. He would draft an unheralded quarterback from Notre Dame named Joe Montana and Dwight Clark from Clemson, and they started the rebuilding process. Then in 1979, they were competitive. They weren't that bad in 79. They were able to at least move the ball, but their defense was still atrocious, especially against the pass. And they were in a lot of games, but they turned out to be losses. And then 1980, they won their first 3 games to start the 1980 season. And then after that, and then after that, they started the season with 3 straight wins. Then they lost their next 8 in a row, including ugly 59, an ugly 59-14 drubbing to the Cowboys at Texas Stadium, which to make matters worse, they lose Paul Hofer to a season-ending knee injury. But then you would go to 1981, where the Niners finally, with that young secondary and which was start of a dynasty, the NFC Championship game. So, so the Niners, that takes us to the NFC Championship game on January 10th, 1982. At Candlestick Park, the Niners taking on the Dallas Cowboys. And yeah, so the Niners end up finishing the regular season with a 13-3 record, with the best record in the NFL. And that really, and out of their 13 wins, they routed the Cowboys 45-14 in Week 6, which many people believe that game was one of the big turning points, feeling that the Niners can be contenders. And that was and this game was on January 10th, 1982, at Candlestick Park, and it was the game was on CBS. Vince Scully and Hank Stram with the call, and and the play was known as a catch. The wide receiver Dwight Clark made the leap and grab to beat Dallas. And this was the new 49ers, the new team. And the Niners made that drive, and they would, beat the Cowboys. And I want to look at the box score from that game. The Niners were able to overcome 6 turnovers and still win the game. And so, and it was their first meeting. The Niners were now 0-3 all time in postseason against Dallas. And it was Niners wide receiver Dwight Clark making that catch. And on the first opening drive, quarterback Joe Montana hit a 17-yard pass to Charlie Young. Then Linville Elliott before throwing an 8-yard touchdown to wide receiver Freddie Solomon. Dallas responded to Danny White's 20-yard pass to Butch Johnson, setting up a 44-yard field goal by Raphael Septien. Then the Niners gave the running back Bill Ring a lost fumble. Danny White, 26-yard touchdown to Tony Hill, made it 10-7 Dallas. Then in the second quarter, San Francisco reached to the Cowboy 27-yard line, and Everson White intercepted a pass from Montana in the end zone, but forcing Dallas punt. Montana threw a 20-yard strike to Clark to retake a 14-10 lead. The Cowboys responded on an 80-yard drive, including a controversial, questionable pass interference play on Niners defensive back rookie Ronnie Lott. And and then after that, the Niners, running back with a controversial penalty by Ronnie Lott, which was nullified by that interception at the Cowboy 35-yard gain to the Niners 12-yard line. 3 plays later, running back Tony Dorsett scored on a 5-yard rusher that gave the Cowboys lead 17-14. The Niners got another chance to score before the intermission, but when they recovered a fumble and a punt at the Dallas Cowboys 42, but a 15-yard illegal block on the back on Clark, and plus coupled with Montana's lost fumble being sacked by Harvey Martin, the Cowboys fared no better as White was sacked on the next drive. Jim Stuckey and once by Lawrence Pillars ended soon after. Then in the third quarter, things got another scoring opportunity when Dwight Hicks returned a punt for 12 yards midfield. The 49ers drove the Cowboys 16-yard line, but once again they failed to score when Montana threw a pass that bounced off of Linville Elliott's hands. It was intercepted by Randy White. However, the Cowboys returned the favor with Danny White's interception by Bobby Leopold. And this time the Niners regaining a 21-17 lead on a 2-yard touchdown run from running back Johnny Davis. 1 minute into the fourth quarter, Septien booted a 22-yard field goal that cut the lead to 21-20. Then Walls recovered a fumble by running back Walt Easley in midfield to set up White's 21-yard touchdown pass to Doug Hosby, giving Dallas a 27-21 advantage. Things got even better when Walls recovered his second interception from Montana on the next drive at the Cowboys 27. The Dallas managed to pick up a few first downs but forced the punt. White kicked the ball to San Francisco at the 11 with only 4 minutes and 54 seconds. This could be last call for San Francisco. Montana subsequently led the Niners to 83 yards on 6-yard line. Then Elliott rushed for 30 yards on the drive, and then Solomon made a big impact by catching 2 passes for 18 yards. And on wide receiver reverse, facing a 3rd down and 3 at the Cowboys 6 with 58 seconds. Montana threw a high pass to Clark, just managed ahead of Walls in the air. Other contributors on the 89 yards when the play referred as the catch: Freddie Solomon, Linville Elliott, Earl Cooper, Mike Wilson, Charlie Young, Dan Audick, John Ayers, Fred Quillen, Randy Cross, and Keith Farnhorst. However, the Cowboys needed a field goal to win and still had enough time to win the game on the last drive when Danny White threw a completion of Drew Pearson that almost went for a touchdown, but Eric Wright made the key tackle on the sideline by dragging him. The Pillars sacked him, forcing a fumble. But recovered by Jim Stuckey and the Niners victory. Clark finished the game with 8 receptions for 120 yards in the contest. And he averaged 15 yards. And then defensive back Everson Walls intercepted 2 passes and recovered a fumble, though he had the misfortune of being assigned over Clark on the catch that won by San Francisco despite losing was with 6 turnovers. This was the 4th postseason meeting between the Cowboys and 49ers, and Dallas won all 3 previous meetings. And then, of course, 2 weeks later, the 49ers would go on to beat the Bengals in Super Bowl 16 to win the franchise's first of what would be 4 Super Bowls of the 80s, first of 5 in franchise history with a 26-21 win in the Pontiac Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan. And that game had a lot of significance because the 2 teams would not face again as the Niners continued to dominate through the 1980s. Dallas Cowboys continued to just fall steady and decline as as they continued to dominate, as the Niners would continue, the Dallas Cowboys would really fall on hard times in the late 80s. And, of course, that would be until of course, the Cowboys hit rock bottom in the late 80s. A 3-13 record led to Tom Landry retirement or forced out as Cowboys head coach as Jerry Jones, a Arkansas businessman, bought the Cowboys. And then they brought in Jimmy Johnson to coach the Cowboys. It was just, and they kind of struggled. In Jimmy Johnson's first year, the Cowboys went 1-15 that year, and the Niners beat the Cowboys in the '89 regular season. They were the defending Super Bowl champs on their way to winning back-to-back, and then the Niners after that, the Niners were going to win their 2nd Super Bowl in a row, their 4th in the decade. But then the 2 teams would hook up. The Cowboys would improve in 1990 with all their draft picks they got from the Herschel Walker trade, and in 1991 they made it back to the playoffs. Then we go 1992. Even though the Cowboys had only won more than the yard total offense than the 49ers, 416 to 415, Dallas had forced 4 crucial turnovers, and that was the difference in the game. They were +4 in that turnover ratio, and the Cowboys capitalized, and that was the reason why they won. San Francisco's first drive of the game on that controversial holding penalty on Guy McIntyre wiped out a 63-yard touchdown completion from Steve Young to Jerry Rice, and I remember that very well because that was the difference. Was going to be the major factor of the game, and they had the punt. Despite a 19-yard reception from Michael Irvin, the Cowboys on the first play also punted. But returner Alan Grant fumbled the ball, hit hard from Dixon Edwards, and fullback Daryl Johnston recovered at the Niner 22. The Cowboys restarted their first drive with a completion 21-yard game to the to the Niners one, but San Francisco defense managed to hold them on 3 straight plays, and the Cowboys settled for a field goal. San Francisco running back Mark Logan returned a ensuing 50-yard kickoff to the Cowboys 48, aided by a 16-yard run by Ricky Waters. Troy Aikman or scored on Steve Young's 1-yard touchdown run to take a 7-3 lead. Dallas was forced to punt on the next drive, but then Troy Aikman was sacked twice by Bill Romanowski, and then another by Martin Harrison for a total of 19 yards. Grant returned the football to the Cowboy 47. San Francisco then drove to the Cowboys 29 and stalled the drive on Mike Kofer's 47-yard field goal after a punt. Waters lost a fumble, recovered by defensive back Kevin Smith, aided by a holding defensive by Pierce Holt, holding on to the running back Emmitt Smith down at the yard line of the third down. The 49ers objected by starting Holt and were fooled by a fake handoff. Thinking Smith actually had the ball. Dallas took a 10-7 lead on Smith's 4-yard touchdown. A 21-yard reception by Rice sparked the Niners' drive to the Cowboys 10, where Kofor made a 28-yard field goal. And within less than 2 minutes of the second quarter, Kofor's kick went out of bounds and giving Dallas a chance to score before the half. Aikman managed to lead them on a 25-yard line, but Elliott's 43-yard field goal attempt was wide right, tied at 10 going to intermission. After receiving the second half kickoff return, the Cowboys marched 78 yards, featuring a 38-yard leaping catch by Alvin Harper, who was always burnt the 49ers. And he made another big, important catch later in the game. We'll get to you in a moment. Scoring on Johnson's 3-yard touchdown run, 17-10. The 49ers would struck back on 35-yard completion. Young to Rice, 43-yard field goal by Mike Kofor, made it 17-13. However, Dallas put together a 79-yard drive. 31-yard reception by tight end Jay Novacek. The second long drive was capped by Aikman's 16-yard pass to Smith to give the Cowboys a 24-13 advantage. Then, on the ensuing drive, midway through the fourth quarter, Cowboys linebacker Ken Norton Jr. intercepted that pass from Steve Young and returned it to the Niners' 45-yard line. Dallas subsequently marched to the 7 rather than attempt a field goal on 4th and 1. Smith attempted to run for a first down, but was tackled by linebacker Michael Walter for no gain. The 49ers drove 93 yards, and then Rice on a 5-yard touchdown reception cut the lead to 24-20. With 4:22 left in the contest, but on the first play after the ensuing kickoff, the play that put a dagger into the 49ers, and I'll never forget it. Troy Aikman hooked up with a 14-yard pass to Alvin Harper, who ended up a 14-yard catch and run, ended up racing for another 70 yards to the San Francisco 9-yard line. And that play broke the Niners' back. That broke the back. Then 3 plays later, wide receiver Kelvin Martin scored on a 6-yard touchdown reception, making it 30-20. The extra point was missed with 3:43 left to play. The Niners tried to attempt one last try to come back, but Young was intercepted, this time by free safety James Washington at the 2-minute warning, and that all she wrote, any hopes of a Niner comeback. Aikman threw for 322 yards, 2 touchdowns with no interceptions. Emmitt Smith, the NFL's leading rusher, 114 yards on 24 carries, averaging 4.7 yards per carry. Rice would have 8 balls for 123 yards. He averaged 15.3 yards and scored a touchdown. Ricky Waters rushed for 69 yards, caught 6 balls for 69. And then, in the post game, you hear Jimmy Johnson saying, "How about them Cowboys?" And the game stood the last playoff road win until 30 years of 2 nights ago when they They end up winning. And then 2 weeks later, the Cowboys defeated the Buffalo Bills 52-17, and they would win their first Super Bowl since 1977. The first would be first of three Super Bowls that the Cowboys Lombardi trophies with the Cowboys would collect in 3 of the next 4 years. So let's just and then they would meet up again in the NFC Championship game in 1993. This time, the Cowboys on January 8th, correction, that was the NFC Championship game. It was and this time, before the week before the game, Jimmy Johnson went on some the Dallas sports talk show station in Big D, and he famously guaranteed that the team would win and his team would not disappoint. The Cowboys jumped out to a 28-7 halftime lead, racking up 273 yards of offense and 19 first downs and scoring 4 touchdowns. San Francisco finished the first half with just only 110 total yards and 6 first downs. And then Cowboys end up racking up 377 total yards of offense without any turnovers. And remember, Troy Aikman was knocked out of that game with a concussion. He was 14 of 18 for 177 yards, 2 touchdowns. Brady Kosar, the former Cleveland Brown, threw 9 passes for 83 yards and a score. Smith led the Cowboys rusher with 88 yards, 77 receptions for 85 yards. Young threw for 287 yards in a losing effort, a touchdown in the first NFC Championship rematch that both teams for the previous year since 1971. Incidentally, the game involved the Cowboys defeating the 49ers for the second year in a row. Aikman later said he had no memory of playing this game, according to his agent, Lee Steinberg, who also was the agent of Steve Young, who spoke to Aikman at the hospital after the game. Aikman asked him where he was at the hospital, and he had been playing great and said if his team had won. Despite this, Aikman still returned to lead the Cowboys to their second Super Bowl win over the Buffalo Bills a week later. And this brings in 1994. So after that game, everybody know that Ada Barlow came in there with Carmen Policy walking down the elevator, going down the United locker room after another second straight defeat to the Cowboys in the NFC Championship game and stated that this is not going to happen to us again next year. And they were going to do everything they can to beat the Dallas Cowboys. Now, we all know what happened in the offseason, a little more over a month plus, several weeks later after the season ended, the Super Bowl, Jimmy Johnson resigned. And that's because of philosophical differences with Jerry Jones, the controversial owner of Jerry Jones. So that was a chance for the 49ers with this new NFL salary cap. They picked the plum or apple off that free agency tree, and they snatched up Ken Norton Jr. from the Dallas Cowboys. Then they added some more pieces, bringing in guys like Richard Dent, a former Super Bowl MVP with the Chicago Bears. They brought in a two-time Super Bowl champion Charles Mann. They end up picking up, a lot of players. They end up picking up Deion Sanders from the Falcons early in the '94 season. They end up they really retooled that team, bringing in guys like Bart Oates, bringing in guys like um, they were retooling for that team. They end up with this new salary cap. A lot of the players, guys like Tim McDonald, they brought in players like free agents. Had a good draft that year. They ended up drafting Bryant Young, who just got inducted to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and had brought in rookies. Drafted William Floyd to be their fullback. And they retooled. A lot of the players restructured. Jerry Rice, Steve Young, and some of the veterans restructured their contracts to get this opportunity to beat the knockoff, the dreaded Dallas Cowboys, who denied them 2 years in a row of their quest of their fifth Super Bowl. So that brings us to the 1994-95 season. The Niners in 1994 with the best record in football. They went through a slow start. They were early, the low point of the season. The Niners were 3-2. They got this mollywopped by the Philadelphia Eagles at Candlestick Park, where Steve Young had that tirade, and many people said that was the low point of the season because right after that game, that's where people wanted the George Seifert fired after that game. But this time was different. The Niners were going to win 10 straight games. They would not lose again until they lose to the Vikings in the regular season finale on Monday night against the NFC Central Division playoff-bound Minnesota Vikings. They would beat the Bears 44-15 in the divisional playoff. But this was the matchup, third straight year. Niners, Cowboys, NFC Championship. Dallas winning the last two. San Francisco with quarterback Steve Young. Remember, they beat them in the regular season 20 in a closely matchup, 21-14 back in week 11. But the Cowboys came into that NFC Championship with a lot of injuries. Emmitt Smith was not 100% with that hamstring injury. And, all the hype between these two rivals all week, while Troy Aikman entered the game with a 7-0 record, never lost a playoff game. The Cowboys had the eventual advantage in total yards of offense, 451, 291, but the Niners had 4 turnovers overall in the contest. They had 3 turnovers into three. Okay, we're getting ready to wrap it up for this Niners radio podcast. So the Niners were going to win 38-28. Steve Young, the Niners, 321 unanswered points off Cowboys turnovers. And that was one, I would say, my favorite NFC Championship games of all time would be the Niners beating the Cowboys, ending their reign as two-time reign as Super Bowl champs. And also, all right, and also them beating the Bears in Chicago in the '88 NFC Championship game, and Steve Young never seen the day when he finally got that victory lap over after beating the Cowboys, and then 2 weeks later, they beat the Chargers 49-28 for the Niners' 5th Super Bowl. So we gotta get ready to wrap up. I'm on location right now. They're getting ready to close up this coffee shop. They're getting ready to wrap it up. So I'm going to end this podcast right now. We'll get some guests to preview the Niners and Cowboys tomorrow and the rest of the playoff action on Niners Radio. Wherever you're at, you can watch this replay later on. I'm Brian Professor B. Davis, and so long. Thank you for watching this 49ers Live podcast presented by Zinni. Zinni, the official eyewear of your San Francisco 49ers. Take care, everybody. We'll continue to our playoff Niners and Cowboys this Sunday, 3:30 p.m. Catch it on Fox. Thank you for watching the 49ers Live podcast on Niners Radio 49. Have a good night, everybody.